thank you for joining us today for the Senate Education Committee meeting. We will start off today with, are there any bill introductions?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Mike O'Neill on behalf of Kansas Policy Institute, here to introduce 22 RS 2683 dealing with ESA's bill we've been working with Senator Erickson on.
Okay. Are there any questions for Mr. O'Neill? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Not even, we're not going to go there, but thank you.
I've been avoiding that all week.
So I asked all those in favor, heard some votes, all those opposed. Okay, seeing none, that passes. Thank you so much.
Madam Chairman.
And Mr. O'Neill, the hearing for tomorrow is being postponed. All right, thank you. So we will move on to our hearing, which is Senate Bill 341. And we'll start off with an overview from our reviser. Thank you for being with us today, Tamara. That's it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, committee. You should have access to a reviser memorandum on Senate Bill 341. The memo does include some additional information, definitions, and statutory citations for some more background information. Senate Bill 341 would amend the Kansas School Equity and Enhancement Act to remove federal impact aid from the definition of local foundation aid. If you'll bear with me for just a moment, it's been a little while since we've talked about the nuts and bolts of the school finance formula, so I just kind of want to revisit that very quickly. There are three types of foundation aid in the school finance formula. There is local foundation aid, which is what we're talking about in this bill, state foundation aid, which are the appropriations from the legislature, and total foundation aid, which is the base amount multiplied by the adjusted enrollment of a district. And state foundation aid is determined by subtracting local foundation aid from total foundation aid. And currently, the definition of local foundation aid, which is in the bill, beginning on page 4, starting in line 34, it has a list of all the things that are included as local foundation aid, and one of those, I believe it's number 8, is an amount equal to 70% of the federal impact aid of the school district. Senate Bill 341 would remove that amount, the 70% of federal impact aid, from the definition of local foundation aid. So for the school districts that receive federal impact aid, which most school districts do not, this change would reduce their local foundation aid determination, which would then, because of the way that formula is structured, like I just went over, would increase their state foundation aid determination by that amount. Senate Bill 341 would take effect upon publication in the statute book, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Committee, what questions do you have for Tamara? Senator Petty.
So Tamara, this probably is beyond your needing to answer, but do you know the number of school districts?
Yes, we do, and we have a handout.
Oh.
And why don't we go ahead and hand those out?
Oh, thank you.
I believe when JG and I met yesterday, the number of districts is 23. Is that correct? Yep. And you have, I'm assuming you have a follow-up question.
It just, when I looked through this bill, it looks like this, I mean, you went over that, but this is the nut and bolts of this. Correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Other questions, committee members, for Tamara? Seeing none, thank you so much. And for those of you that still need copies, if you will contact our committee assistant, she will make sure that you get one. JG, would you just briefly explain what they're looking at with the spreadsheet that you provided them?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What you have is a copy of information that the Department of Education puts together. This is a listing of all of the school districts that received federal impact aid in the 2020-2021 school year. So it reflects the amount ranging from $10.3 million down to about $4,300. And impact aid is basically to help those with a lot of federal land, tribal land, for help with their property tax, because those are normally exempt, to help educate children whose parents work for the military or on Native American land, and to help with capital expenditures for those districts as well. The funding goes directly to the school district. It does not flow through the state treasury at all.
Are there any questions for JG? Senator Dietrich.
So all of the federal impact aid goes directly to the school district, not through the state, is what you just said. But when they're reduced by 70%, that then does what?
What that would do is it would decrease the amount of state foundation aid that they get by that same amount, that 70% of this number. I think the fiscal note said it's roughly $13 million.
Correct. Okay. Any other questions? Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Forgive my ignorance on this, but I don't see Stafford County on here, which is in my district, and Stafford County is home to Quivira National Wildlife Refuge. Can someone explain that?
I'm seeing a hand up. So why don't you go ahead and step forward, please identify yourself, and please address that question.
Oh, it's on. My name is Keith Mispegel. I'm the superintendent of Fort Leavenworth School District. Federal property, if it was off the tax rolls after 1938, would not count towards impact aid. So I'm not sure if when that timing was, but they're specific to the federal lands after 1938.
Okay.
That's as much as I know of, so I think.
We can have research look into that, but Superintendent Ms. Pagel, why don't you just go ahead? You are first up to actually present, so why don't we just go ahead and get started with that?
Okay.
Now, we do have your letter, so if you would just speak to us.
Yes.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and the Senate Education Committee. My name is Dr. Keith Mispegel, as I mentioned. I'm honored to serve as the superintendent for the Fort Leavenworth School District, USD 207. Thank you for the opportunity to address Senate Bill 341 on behalf of the military dependents and military students that I'm fortunate to serve. You have my written testimony, and I'd like to share some additional details in my verbal testimony today. I'm in my 24th year with Fort Leavenworth School District as teacher, elementary principal, deputy superintendent, and superintendent for the last 12 years. So I ask you please not to be surprised by the passion that I bring to this topic, because it's very near and dear to me. I've not only advocated for federally impacted students in Kansas, but also on a national level in a couple of my roles that I've been elected to and volunteer for federal kids across the country. There are over 1 million federally connected students across the country associated with federal properties, Native American lands, tribal lands, and military. Of those 1 million students counted towards federal impact aid, that represents over 10 million students nationally that receive federal impact aid from the Department of Education. In Kansas, there's nearly 11,000 federally impacted students counted from the Department of Education in 23 districts. That the total enrollment is over 44,000 students in Kansas associated with the 23 districts and the 11,000 federally connected. That's roughly 10% of the 450,000 plus students in Kansas that are associated with mobile military families, Native American families, and those living on federal properties, all of which would directly benefit from successful passage of Senate Bill 341. The topic of impact aid is seldom discussed and even more narrowly understood because of its complexities in eligibility and funding. And that's where the misunderstandings start, and quite honestly, that's where they end, because it is a very complex provision from the Department of Education. Of the 286 public school districts in Kansas, all are unique in operations, education, programs, challenges, needs, and wants. And Fort Leavenworth is unique just the same. I am one of 7 districts across the country that are considered coterminous, which is a state public school district completely housed on federal property, which drives the specific separate statute for Fort Leavenworth not allowing me to have a bonding capacity, so no ability to bond. Pardon me. This statute alone that prevents me from having a bond issue has saved the state over $75 million in the last 20 years from the capital improvements based on our capacity. I've had to save up federal impact aid over the years, and several years ago when I presented to the Speaker of the House when he was on Fort Leavenworth, he said, "Keith, how do you operate and pay for your buildings?" I said, "Sir, the best way I can explain it is that it's a checkbook. We save up our money. When we have a construction project, we pay it off. That's how it's required because we don't have a bonding capacity." He said, "Why don't all Kansas school districts do it that way?" I don't know. We have to do it that way because of the statute. So
Introduce a bill.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Sorry. For the last 24 years, I've been a part of the education of over 50,000 military-connected students because of the high mobility rate. I'm here to tell you, without a doubt, Kansas is a very strong state academically and great for our mobile military-connected students to thrive while they're with us and succeed at their next location when they leave us due to a parent's relocation due to military reassignment. The focus on teaching, learning, student growth, academic, extracurricular programs in schools in Kansas has always had a laser focus and centered on one top priority: students. Kansas superintendents celebrate our students' success, and we do anything and everything we can for them. We not only celebrate our own successes, but we celebrate the successes and opportunities of our fellow districts and what they achieve, because we know what they stand for are students, and the students are a part of the whole of our 450,000 plus. The competition among educators across the state is how we can create positive change for all of our own students while taking best practices and ideas from our neighbors and how we can support. This has never been more apparent than during the last 2 years of COVID, where this state has come together, where legislators like you have come together, where the Kansas State Department of Education, the Kansas State Board of Education, and all educators have come together to do what many states have not been able to do during a pandemic. I shared earlier my work with districts across the country. When I say Kansas has got it going on, Kansas has got it going on, and our students are better off for it. Dr. Watson's goal of leading the world in education is not only inspirational, it's achievable. We as educators develop roadmaps, interventions, programs, and initiatives towards this, and it's focused on individuals, one student, one school, one district at a time. School superintendents across the state have ongoing conversations about how we can best impact our schools and students, and we strive to positively impact as many as possible. As the father of 5 boys, ages ranging 16 to 23, they've never had to be separated from me for more than 5 days. They've been in the same school system and even the same house their entire lives. The students I'm fortunate to educate every year will average 7 moves between kindergarten and 12th grade. And if you ask any of them, they have different answers when you ask them where their home is. I'm probably one of the few superintendents that when interviewing prospective teachers and talking about a scenario when a student is shut down in the classroom, disengaged, and really not connected, the teacher says, "Is everything okay? What's wrong?" And he says, "My dad's deployed. I don't know if he'll come home." How do you respond as a teacher? Not many questions like that are asked in interviews for other teachers, but it's something that we live every day. Sorry, I get emotional. We could literally spend a whole day discussing the uniqueness of my district, Whether it's my high annual turnover of over 50%, increasing percentages of students with significant special needs because Kansas is considered a leader in health systems and education collaboration, the 100-plus English language learners from over 50 countries as international officers, our full-time counselors in each school because of the growing concerns and suicidal ideations of military service members, family members, and students, even as young as second grade this year. We also experienced a very low free and reduced percentage on Fort Leavenworth. What our overall percentage of roughly 12% free and reduced doesn't reflect is the annual socio-economic status of Fort Leavenworth. There are assumptions that Fort Leavenworth is a largely officer post. That is not the case. In reality, Fort Leavenworth is home to approximately 50% enlisted and 50% officers. I've been told by active duty service members that they live to serve the country and our state and do not seek or want handouts. I respect this service greatly, but in turn reduces the actual calculations of funding associated with a true representation of Fort Leavenworth community, decreasing Title I, Title IIA, at risk, and other funding associated. That's just one example of many that were unique. You've heard Kansas is the only state in the country currently choosing to count federal impact aid allowable by law towards base state aid. The last two states to change statute on this recently were New Mexico and Alaska. In those states, the fiscal note attached to their formula calculations were $67 million and over $80 million respectively. Kansas' associated fiscal note is currently estimated conservatively at $13 million to reflect the same intent of Title VII of ESSA as the other 49 states. Much of the ongoing debate and concern for the last few years has been that changing this so the 23 districts receive base aid and 100% of the federal impact aid would go against the Gannon Supreme Court decision and disequalize the state. This is not the case. As long as all Kansas school districts continue to receive the base aid as determined and no school district is decreased in state aid as a result of changing this language, the Supreme Court decision remains intact. This then creates the argument that these districts would raise teacher salaries to a level that no one could compete with and then steal teachers and staff from surrounding districts as a result. Again, the intent of the federal impact aid to support districts who've been impacted due to a federal presence is the key. I would offer a consideration for discussion to this argument of stealing teachers and staff from surrounding areas and why it would not be the case. Since federal impact aid is intended to support public schools impacted with a federal presence and unique situations, specifically determining where impact aid would be located meets the need and challenges. For example, the concerns expressed have related to unique differences, and you'll hear from Geary County, Fort Leavenworth, of course, and Royal Valley. These challenges, by and large, fall under a capital outlay, special education programs and services, English language learners, and professional development to support our staff with trainings to address individual needs for the populations we serve. If Senate Bill 341 were passed, with consideration that federal impact aid not increase general fund or LOB budget authority, but rather used for special revenue funds, it would negate the ongoing fear of raising teachers' salaries to a level unattainable by others and would support the 23 impact aid districts in much needed areas. For my district alone, those areas are annually fluctuating and creating challenges because of high mobility. Kansas and Kansas legislators like you all have worked hard to be where we are right now as a leader in the country because you've always looked at the parts of the whole. There's no way to effectively impact positive change unless it can be broken down in that way, which is what passing Senate Bill 341 achieves. Kansas is widely seen across the country as a military-friendly state. Kansas was also the first state to sign on the Military Interstate Compact Children's Commission. Further steps in continuing Kansas' long history of supporting our military and critical supports for districts enrolling students living on Indian lands would be recognized and supported with this bill. Now is an excellent opportunity to pass Senate Bill 341 and promote Kansas as a leader in education and support our military families, Native American families, and tribal communities, which would positively impact over 44,000 students across the state of Kansas. I ask respectfully that we continue to look at how positively impacting parts of the whole will continue Kansas forward as a leader. And since we're the only state addressing this right now, we have an excellent opportunity to tell the story, not only in Kansas, but also as a significant strategic communication message nationally with the Department of Defense and other states that we are in Kansas taking the lead in the world of education. Thank you for the work that you do, and thank you for your consideration of Senate Bill 341.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mispagel. We're going to go ahead and listen to the other testimony, and then we'll follow up with questions. So next up, I have General Perry Wiggins. General, thank you for being here today.
Committee members, I'm a little bit different, as you're going to see. I'm surrounded by educational professionals, but so I'll try to stay out of that lane. But I'm Perry Wiggins. I'm a retired lieutenant general. I served in the United States Army for 34 years, and I commanded the historic Big Red 1, 1st Infantry Division, just down the road here. It's one of the best assignments I ever had. So it's great to be in the state of Kansas, and truthfully, we came back to the state of Kansas because Kansas values are the Army values that I lived with for 34 years. And so it was a very simple transition to me. I've been the executive director for the Governor's Military Council now for about 6 years, going on 6 years. When I first came on, Governor Brownback asked me if I would take on this role. And I told him that I wanted to retire and be a professional guide for pheasant and deer. And I do a pretty good job of that, but if I could stay connected to the military and their families, I'd do it. And he promised that. And he also promised me that it would be apolitical. And I said I could do that. And so as I took on the role, one of the things that I was charged to do was to build the increased economic impact of the military here in the state of Kansas, which is about $9 to $10 billion to the GDP of the state of Kansas. If you take a look at the Central Flint Hills, for example, 41 to 45% of their GDP comes from Fort Riley, Kansas. That's significant when you think about it. And I think we're undershooting there because we can't count spouses. When I came in, about 11 to 17% of the force was married. First sergeants would tell you if you had to have a spouse, we'd issue you one. Now today, if you take a look at it, over 60% of the force is married. Many of those very young individuals, privates, specialists. And out of that 60% of spouses, over 50% of them work. And we can't capture where they work. And I'll give you a short story. I went into a Dillard's, and I was talking to a manager there, and he was asking me, after he found out who I was, how he could help bring soldiers into the workforce there at Dillard's. And as I was talking to him, I told him, I said, well, you know, bottom line for me is, you know, we can do a lot of things, but I said one of the things we got to do is we got to recruit spouses. And because of, you know, their careers and count, my wife was a career person as well. I understand the challenges. And the person that was escorting me next to him, he goes, well, I don't have any spouses that work for me. And she said, oh, I'm a spouse. My husband flies Chinooks at Fort Riley, Kansas. So he didn't even know. So we can't capture that. And I only bring that up because we don't have a true appreciation of the impact they have for our state economically. So as you take a look of it, about 170,000 jobs are directly, indirectly supported by the Defense Department here in the state of Kansas as well. And so as we go about, there's a significant role that the military plays economically in the state. And so as I started to recruit additional force structure, an Army Brigade Combat Team, for example, when I came on board, or a Soldier Force Assistance Brigade, the Army had a formula that they used. The formula was not transparent. It gauged training areas, it gauged facilities, it gauged a lot of number of criteria. But one of the criteria was quality of life. But they couldn't put an exact formula or give me why we scored so poorly in quality of life. And as I reached out to my counterparts, having just left the Army, I talked to a couple of them, and candidly, they admitted to me that there was two problems with Fort Riley, Kansas. One of them was spouse reciprocity, and the second one was federal impact aid equalization. I'll be truthful with you, I don't even understand. I majored in fraternity and baseball in college. So when you start talking math, I was lost. But one thing I did get from that conversation was we as the state of Kansas need to get the bullseye off our back. So we went to work, developed a strategy for reciprocity, and I want to congratulate many of you here played a huge role in getting rid of really reciprocity not being a problem or an issue here in our state. It's no longer a problem. And with that, we went from being a red on the scoring mechanism to green in the eyes of the Department of Defense. So it's no longer a map that they displayed and showed Kansas in red and the rest of the nation in green, for example. So then we started to attack, of course, federal impact aid. And I will tell you that as I started to dig into it, they candidly shared that they have a perception that programs are impacted by equalizing federal impact aid. So I don't know. I asked them what programs. They said, well, there's several programs out there. There's Hearts Apart. There's academic programs that work with them academically to bring their scores up so they're competitive. And the reason that's important as well is my daughter, for example, went to 4 different high schools in 4 different years. When she came into the education system and tried to compete for college, trying to fit in on the OML was almost impossible. Her grades were great, but trying to match her grades with a school system that she had just joined, a lot of the educators there, and frustrated me as a parent, didn't want to put her in the scoring process because they said, we don't know how hard those courses were in that other school. So my child was disadvantaged. And I fought for that. That's the frustration a lot of parents see. It may not be true, but in the minds of the people that perceive it, it's truth. So I bring that to your attention. That's what the Department of Defense brought to me as the big problem is that equalization of federal impact aid disadvantages military children. So now I would tell you, we were in 2020, we went to try to recruit Space Command. You might have read about it in the paper. 4 communities here in the state vied to land that particular: Wichita, Derby, Leavenworth, and I believe one other. That's right, Kansas City, exactly. And so as we went through that process, one thing that really maturated was transparency in the services. The Secretary of the Air Force was very candid on how he was going to score the different states and the different communities. And that was refreshing to me because it showed they used certain criteria. I provided that criteria to you, and it's 9 criteria, and how they scored it. I'm not going to go over that in detail, just to surmise that McConnell Air Force Base was in the footprint of Derby, for example. So I dug into that. For 2 years now, they have been doing this assessment in the United States Air Force of all 157 installations that they have in their portfolio. And McConnell Air Force Base scored at the lowest of the low in supporting communities. That doesn't represent Kansas. That does not reflect how hard we row to educate our children and the importance we place on it. But it does reflect, through the lens of the Department of Defense and decision makers, how we score. And what I had a realization on is we're getting a report card. Every state gets a report card now. And the people that are grading us aren't in our state. They're outside our state, whether we want to admit it or not. And what it tells me is, from my foxhole as the governor's military council, is I need to fix that. Because I'm recruiting infrastructure. I'm recruiting mission. I'm recruiting force structure. And I want to make sure that that GDP that the Department of Defense brings to the state doesn't shrink, it grows. Because it's important to this state. It's a cornerstone to this state. And during COVID, it was absolutely evident that the people who were not impacted by COVID financially was the United States soldier. They got a paycheck. They continued to work. And that brought stability to that region, specifically where they're located, economically. They were still going to restaurants and buying the food. They were still frequenting stores and grocery stores because they had money. They didn't have to worry about their job. And so that was important to me. But so the last thing I'd like to kind of leave you is, With that in mind, that we're getting a report card, we're getting graded, and that there's a perception from the Department of Defense that equalization of federal impact aid is a negative, I think it's something that we as a state collectively need to take on and find a solution. Like I told you, I'm not an educator. I don't look at it through that lens, but I do look at it through the lens now of a Kansan because I'm here. And like I said, in 2012, we didn't have a base realignment and closure in 2012. We had it in 2005. A number of you were probably around. Department of Defense decided to reduce the number of military installations here in the nation. And so a lot of communities lost. Kansas did not lose during that particular event. But in 2012, without a BRAC, the Department of Defense decided to reduce, especially the Army, reduce a number of brigade combat teams. That's a unit organization within divisions of about 5,200 soldiers. If you add the dependents and spouses to that, it probably equates to about 9,000 people. Fort Riley lost an infantry brigade combat team in 2012. And it happened with not even a bleep made about it. It just happened. Kansas lost about 9,000 people. And to that community, it was a significant impact. And when I peeled back 2012 data and I took a look at it, one of the big things that we scored the lowest on was quality of life. And under quality of life, the Army had spouse reciprocity and education were the two biggest things. That has not changed. That is still their focus. They're having retention problems today. And what they said is if we can recruit the spouse, we can keep the soldier. That's true. And the number one thing on spouses' minds when they're going to an installation is where's my child going to school and how good is that school system? And if it doesn't rate and the Army says, soldier, you're going to that installation, he or she becomes a geographic bachelor because that family is not coming. And unfortunately, a rate we don't track in statistical data, but I know is increasing, is geographic bachelors at every installation. And that has a mental impact, not only on those family members, but that service member. So I would ask that as a committee, we take a look at this through a lens, maybe economically. I know that's different for your committee, but I would also ask you to take a look at it as Kansas, and we have a problem. They now show the map of life's reciprocity, and we're green. But they also showed a map of federal impact aid and education, and we're red. And my only charge to us is how do we fix that? Thank you very much, Madam Chair, committee members. Appreciate the opportunity, and I look forward to hearing your questions.
Thank you very much. We will get to questions. We're going to listen to the rest of them, and then we'll circle around for questions. Thank you, General. At this time, we'll call on Dr. Reginald Eggleston, Superintendent of Geary County School District. And I'm going to remind the folks that we need to be done here. We've got 20 minutes, so we've got 2 more speakers besides you, and then we want to ask some questions. So thank you so much for being here.
Madam Chair, committee members, good afternoon. I'm Reginald Edison, Superintendent of Geary County Schools. Just to piggyback off of a few comments that General Wiggins made, when I talked to the commanding general and command sergeant majors on Fort Riley, the number one issue that comes up is always education. And the reason why it's so important is because it's a recruiting mechanism for getting soldiers to Fort Riley. Unless you are familiar with the Flint Hills area, most people only know about the school system. And I say that in a very positive way because they know about the quality of education and the services that our district is able to provide them. So I've been in education almost 30 years, and I'm also in the Army Reserves. So I understand both sides of it. I've been in the Army Reserves now 31 years. I'm a lieutenant colonel. And so I hear and feel the passion as well as the concerns when individuals talk about soldiers being deployed, as well as separations and how that impacts the family. So I just want to share a few things with you before taking my seat. So we at USD 475 are honored to serve the soldiers and the families at Fort Riley. District serving High concentrations of mobile military-connected students face unique challenges educating and supporting the social, emotional needs of military dependents. Our goal is to ensure that Geary County students receive a public school education that is second to none. The Geary County School District is responsible for educating approximately 7,000 students, with 3,500 being military-dependent children in grades pre-K through 12. The district is only allocated 30% of its awarded impact aid funds, while its own base student population represents 57% of the total district elementary student population. The district uses its impact aid funds for capital projects, building repair, maintenance, custodial costs necessary to keep those facilities in educational programs. The district is unable to collect tax revenue or persuade voters to do support or provide support for those schools because it's just basically going to the students and the families on post, not impacting those in the local area. So a few points. Military children are enrolled in all 18 of our schools. I mention this because most people only think about the 5 schools that are on post. The use of the additional impact aid will not only benefit military-connected students and their families, but will positively impact the civilian students and families in our district and surrounding community. At present, we have a shortage of available daycare and preschool opportunities. We have a high concentration of younger students within our district. Funding would assist us in meeting the growing need for this service with both military-connected and civilian students. Funds will further the district's effort to serving the growing number of students needing special education services. In our district, we provide appropriate and necessary special education and related services for qualifying students to provide a free and appropriate public education within the least restricted environment for students ages 3 through 21. We currently have 514 students in our ELL program with 49 languages spoken, which is another area that we would benefit, or students would benefit from the development of academic programs and supports. Because of these examples provided, I support and respectfully request the successful passing of Senate Bill 341. So thank you for your time and allowing me to have this opportunity to stand before you.
Thank you, Superintendent Eggleston. At this time, I'm going to call on Superintendent Eric Davis. Eric, thank you for being here with us today.
Madam Chairwoman. So I'm here representing a different side of Impact Aid. I'm representing the Native American community here in Kansas. My name is Eric Davis. I'm the superintendent at USD 337 Royal Valley, just north of Topeka. Thank you for having this hearing today to give us an opportunity to share how important this is to our school district. USD 337 Royal Valley is a 3A school district. Northeast Kansas educates nearly 850 kids. Our district serves the communities of Hoyt, Maeda, and the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation. Of the 850 students in our district, 34% of them identify as Native American. Our district qualifies for impact aids not because of a military base, because tribally owned lands and Indian reservation lands. The Royal Valley School District is 169 square miles in size, and the Prairie Band Potawatomi Indian Reservation is 121 square miles. So not all of that is in our district. A small portion of that spills over into Jackson Heights and the Kaw Valley School District, but 94 of those miles, approximately those 94 square miles, are inside of our district. For years, the state of Kansas has been reducing state aid by 70% of our impact aid funds generated. When I've asked why this is the case in the past, it's been met with this statement: something about the funding formula is equalized and it would not be fair to give you more money than other schools. I'm not going to argue with you that the general fund and the LOB are not equalized. However, when it comes to the ability to generate funds for capital improvement projects, I do not believe this is equalized, especially not for impact aid school districts. Let me explain why. As I pointed out earlier, 1/3 of our district population comes from the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation. A bond campaign is nearly impossible to pass in the Royal Valley School District because the campaign would be asking 2/3 of the population to pay the bill for 3/3 of the population. You can see where that would be a problem in voters' eyes to pass some referendum. 20 years ago, the then superintendent began setting aside general fund monies to pay for a lease purchase to conduct capital improvement projects within the district. Last year, Royal Valley transferred $500,925 from the general fund to pay capital expenses for lease purchases and maintenance and operations incurred last year. This money was intended by the State Department to be used for educational expenses, programming for students, staff salaries and benefits, but it's not in our district. It is used for maintenance and operations. I ask you again, does it seem equalized if we must use our general expense funds just to keep our buildings functioning and somewhat modernized? Last year, USD 337 received $165,269 in unrestricted funds as a part of our impact aid. That was after the 70% reduction. And where that money does help with capital expenses, I just wanted you to ask and consider this point. Do you think $165,269 is adequate funding to make up for the loss of property tax revenue generated over approximately 94 square miles? I don't believe so. I anticipate much of the talk today will be about the 2 districts in the state that receive large sums of revenue through their military bases. I do feel that those school districts have their valid concerns and reasons for needing 100% of their impact aid funds. If I accomplished one thing today, I hope that you understand that not all impact aid districts are alike. We all have our unique characteristics that make education a challenge, and the funding comes in at different levels for different districts, depending on the number of students that are federally impacted. If you base your decisions on Senate Bill 341 on those 2 districts alone, you're doing a disservice to the 21 other impact aid districts that do not receive large sums of money of revenue through this stream. USD 337 Royal Valley is the 3rd largest impact aid district in the state of Kansas behind Fort Leavenworth and Gary County. The amount of money that I receive in impact aid is incredibly small compared to those 2 districts. We're talking about $385,000. That $385,000 would not be a huge deal for big districts, but for us, it would be a game changer. We need to do things like keep up with our infrastructure, cover increasing costs of special education, and to address unique challenges that apply only to the Royal Valley School District. I urge you today to consider support for Senate Bill 341 and other options that would make this more equitable for all districts in the state of Kansas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Davis. Now, I do see that Senator Pittman is here, but Senator, did you submit your testimony? Okay, I don't think we have it, but since you are here, we would like to hear from you briefly if you could share. Then I do need you to make sure that.
I'll make sure I send it, ma'am.
I need you to email it too.
Okay, we'll do that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, my name is State Senator Jeff Pittman, and I represent 3 of the impact aid districts, Fort Leavenworth, Leavenworth, and Lansing. And I'll be brief. I know we want to get to questions, but knowing the impact that the military has in the Leavenworth community, and knowing that we do face BRAC closures on a decade-by-decade basis, we need to be looking at, my colleagues and I need to be looking at how do we attract. When he talks about force expansion, there are missions that come out of the military that we in Kansas can take advantage of by positioning ourselves favorably in the eyes of the military and the Defense Department. When we looked at expanding MCI, part of the formula was the impact that the Fort Leavenworth community, especially the military base there, had on that facility. And it's estimated in the billions, you know. It has a huge impact. And I just want to say I am very empathetic. I went through the same, I'm gun shy on the formula. We all are. We don't want to necessarily open it up. We're at this point. But perception is reality. And I do think we need to reconsider this piece of it just for the perception. But I also think we need to hold harmless. In other words, don't decrease the funding to each of these districts as we look at this. I don't want to see us just take the money, subtract it out, and then we have a net loss in each of these districts. I don't think that actually is the right way to go. I've heard discussion about that. So, Madam Chair, I encourage us to at least consider this bill, consider the intent, and let's work on a solution here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Pittman. So we are going to open it up for questions, and I will call on Senator Suellentrop because I know that he had a question for General Wiggins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks for being here today, and thanks for your testimony. You talk a lot about the report card. Can we get a copy of the report card so we can determine what our strengths, our weaknesses, and our opportunities and threats might be? Because we will be subject to a BRAC again at some point.
Yes, sir. The Department of the Air Force is the lead right now. The Secretary of the Army, Ms. Wormuth, has said they're going to adopt the Air Forces as a Department of Defense model. In my written testimony, Madam Chair, there is a website there. You can go to that website and see where McConnell Air Force Base example, how it rates by category. It's very, very clear. It's articulated. The thing that I would share with you is that the other services, the Navy and the Army, are following suit. And as soon as I get their criteria, I'll come back and provide that. Right now, they're following the Air Force's criteria as that scorecard. And it is scored not by percentages, although they do keep percentages. It's a green, amber, red scorecard, as you'll see if you go to that website.
If I may, because we are really exposed to losing a good portion of McConnell to Tinker Air Force Base in Oklahoma. They could swallow parts of that thing and nothing flat, and it would devastate that area down there.
One of the problems, sir, and you bring it up, and this goes back to force structure. I had a conversation with the Vice Chief of Staff of the Air Force a few years ago in this capacity, and one of the things they said was when we brought in the new Pegasus KC-46 tankers to McConnell Air Force Base was, we're going to get these 135s off the books. But he says, why do I have 2 refueling bases in the state of Kansas? Why can't I consolidate them? And we have been fighting that fight. And so that's why I'm here, to be honest with you, is I fight that fight all the time. I'm trying to protect the resources here in Kansas militarily. And I will tell you, there's an external audience always looking for efficiencies and effectiveness. And then they're looking for discriminators that they can hold against states in order to make and exact those type of bills. Yes, sir.
One other quick question. In my view of what you've described earlier as a spousal challenge or problems and quality of life and so forth, what's the makeup of our military in Kansas? How many male or how many female? And are we applying the same benefits to attract the male spouse of the female soldier?
Yes, sir. I don't know the percentages. I'll get back with you, sir, Madam Chair. I'll get that to you. But what I will tell you is the statistical data that's true is in the case of separating military or retiring military members here in the state of Kansas, 85% of that decision is made by the spouse. We have a workforce problem in the state of Kansas, not a jobs problem. We got 56,000 jobs. I will tell you that the spouse reciprocity, I can't link it definitively, but we had an increase at Fort Riley, Kansas, for example, of 1,408 veterans that decided to call Kansas home this year. That's above and beyond. I think it had a lot to do with spouses being able to keep their jobs and just transition into the communities, and that's significant. So thank you.
Other questions? Okay, Senator Straub.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question earlier about the Quivira Refuge, I found my own answer. It is through, they pay payments to counties and local governments through the Refuge Revenue Sharing Program. So thank you.
Committee, other questions for those that were here to testify? I'm not seeing any. I would like to make just a few comments. So for those of you who are listening, on the testimony from the general, the website is www.af.mil, and it's under the Support to Families tab. So please, anyone, and for those of you that have your document, it's going to be the second to the last paragraph on the second page is where you'll find that. So that will be helpful. I do want to give a special thank you to Senator Longbine because he did bring this to our committee. I also want to give a special thank you to the general for mentioning that license reciprocity bill. I was in the Commerce Committee when we had the hearings, not once but twice. And a shout out to retired Colonel, who's also our representative, Chris Croft, because he worked for 2 years to make that happen. And with regard to what type of licensure reciprocity is available, males and females, he worked from architects to teacher certification, realtors, it was a little bit of everything, and I'll tell you, it was a real struggle because every single group, pharmacists, whatever, if they weren't a part of a compact already, they had all kinds of nitpicky things that he worked through, and it's made a difference. It's made a difference for our families that have come here with a military spouse or partner. I want to thank our superintendents that came and spoke to us, because I don't think, a couple of you we have not had here in Senate Education to testify before. So I appreciate the work that you do, particularly because you do deal with different issues. Military families face, the only thing that I can think of, and my sister is married to a career military gentleman. The only other work area that I could think of that's similar to the military is our law enforcement, where they know every single day they may not come home. For the military children, it's this gap of time that they know that a parent or both parents have been deployed, and they really don't know when they will see them next. Likewise, they don't know next year where they might be living. And so I thank you for your leadership and the service that you provide, making sure that the teachers that are in those classrooms, the counselors that are there in your schools, are ready to deal with those issues that are very specific and very unique. So thank you for your work. Committee, I have a feeling we will not be here tomorrow. I have a very strong, informed feeling that we won't be here tomorrow, so we will not be having that hearing. I do want to remind you that next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, we will be having our hearings on the Board of Regents nominees. We need to be here on time. Each of you will have an opportunity to ask the nominee questions, but we're going to have to limit the time because we will probably have to be on the floor. Likewise, you're going to need to make sure you know what question or questions you want to ask, and each of you will be limited. Cindy and I will figure out how much time each person has to ask that question or ask those questions, but we need to be ready for that. And then what we will do is the hearing for Senate Bill 362 that was scheduled for tomorrow, we will have that next Thursday. We will also work the bill with regard to the licensing that we worked on yesterday. So, yes, Senator Petty.
Thank you. You mentioned the study that was mentioned by the general, and
I think it's the report card.
The report card. And I'm looking through here, and I didn't write it down because I thought, okay, I'm going to find the testimony, but I can't find it. Could you say it again?
Yes. It is www.af.mil. So I'm assuming that's Air Force Military. Yeah. And then once you get there, the tab is support to families is where you'll find that. So again, I wanted to thank all of you that attended, particularly those of you that were here today to testify. Senator Pittman, you have your homework assignment for this afternoon. Before you leave Kansas, or before you leave the Capitol, get that done. Committee, thank you for your work today.